let's talk about this. I think a good point is made in the comment that was left here. Now, I made a complete joke of a video called "I Can Afford a Hair Transplant If Everybody Pays Me Just $1." It is almost sad that some people thought that was a serious video. I was in complete character, but yeah, there were people who thought that was a real video. And I received a comment on here, but I think there's some truth in this, but I don't know, and I want to explore it more. So someone left this comment, quote, "The trauma of hair loss is so severe that it has caused you," talking about me, "post-traumatic stress disorder. This manifests itself as a periodic regression to the mental state of a 6-year-old. A hair transplant is the only cure," end quote. Let's talk about that. This is the kind of comment that really makes this channel. I love comments like this. Now, I'm assuming the person who left that comment thought that character I was playing was real. And a reminder, there will always be people who watch my videos who don't understand that every once in a while I'll throw you a wild card and I play a character to prove a point about hair loss. And that was exactly the case. I was pretending to be a guy who thought his world was falling apart because he was losing his hair. That's one of the many characters I play. I also play the opposite of that guy. I play a guy named Naughty Nick, who is overly confident and obsessed with masculinity. So, and I play those different characters to prove a point. I'm looking at all sides of the spectrum as people process and deal with their own hair loss. But amazingly, there was more than one person who thought that was a real video that I made. Again, if you want to check it out, it's called "I Can Afford a Hair Transplant If Everybody Pays Me Just $1." Because someone in the comment section suggested that if, with as many subscribers as I have, if everybody pays me $1, I could afford a hair transplant. So in that video, in character, I was begging you to pay me $1 so I could afford it. Secret, I can afford a hair transplant. Other secret, I have no interest in ever getting one. So there we go. But let's talk about this post-traumatic stress disorder. This manifests itself as a periodic regression to the mental state of a 6-year-old. A hair transplant is the only cure. That's very interesting, because if you were me and you read all the comments, what you do, you realize that roughly a third of the people really reflect that mentality. It's as if hair loss has caused post-traumatic stress disorder, and they are going back to the basically emotional intelligence or unskilled behavior of a 6-year-old. And that's interesting because I have a son who's about to turn 8. So I remember how that is. When you're a parent, part of what you do is you help this tiny human become a regular human. You think through things rationally instead of only one-sided and so self-centered, as if the world revolves around you. Okay? So I think that is interesting. And I have talked about that. Ultimately, and it goes back to cause and effect though. Ultimately, does hair loss truly cause post-traumatic stress disorder? Does it truly cause that? Or is it a pre-existing condition that is revealed through hair loss? I've talked before about, and again, this is not a channel about preventing hair loss. It's about helping you overcome it psychologically, and it's ultimately serving as a study of people who can't deal with hair loss, the people who are the opposite of me. So something that I've said before is, one of my theories about why certain people are bothered by hair loss and others aren't, is one of my many theories about that is, one of the many characteristics, is a person who has had some kind of trauma that happened to them younger in life and they never dealt with it. They never talked to a professional about it. And earlier this year I made a video talking about how an official report came out showing that why is it that certain people are depressed and have to depend on medication, all this stuff. They deal with depression and manic depression, all this stuff. More so than anything, what they found out is most people in that situation had some kind of traumatic thing happen to them that they never dealt with. So, therefore, they were never able to deal with other things, day-to-day things, because of that one traumatic, tragic event that happened to them as a child. We could assume it was maybe they were abused, or they had to deal with the death of a parent or death of someone close to them, and they never had a professional to talk about that. Therefore, because they never dealt with that, now they're 19 years old and they're noticing their hairline's changing, and that becomes the thing that really reveals this condition. But on an opposite note, I've also talked about the fact that some guys have never really dealt with any kind of trauma in their life. So they're the opposite. They had no tragic event in their childhood, but now at 19, 20, suddenly they perceived this to be one. So because they've never had to deal with tragedy or perceived tragedy, now they are. So it's like either or. Whether you've dealt with some kind of tragic event early in life or whether you never have, it's those two extremes that I think that cause certain people to really be bothered by hair loss. Whereas me, I feel like I'm in the middle. I had no true tragic event happen to me as a child, but throughout life I've had to overcome things. And I think the hardest things I've had to overcome have been in my late 20s and in my 30s. But either way, I learned to overcome them, and I wasn't trying to mask it by something else. I think when you deny yourself the ability to process and deal with something, it's only going to make every other issue worse. So in my mind, if you're asking me, I don't think that hair loss causes post-traumatic stress disorder. I think it's a pre-existing disorder, and I think it's based on someone not dealing with things that happen to them and they don't learn how to process those things. The theme of my channel, ultimately, as we're closing out 2018, unskilled behavior. People who do not have this life experience to deal with how to behave with perceived problems are going to have trouble with dealing with most problems. People who have skilled behavior, when we encounter new problems in life, which we expect, people who are emotionally intelligent like I am, expect changes to happen all the time and expect to be prepared to deal with those. Even if we don't have specific life experience to deal with that, we have general life experience in knowing here's a problem in general, here's how I'm going to deal with it. So I would love to know what everybody else has to say about that. Tell me how right I am. Tell me how wrong I am. Let's explore this topic right here.